The frost had settled thick on the windshield by the time dawn broke over the parking lot. Marcus Webb woke to the sound of a car door slamming somewhere nearby, his neck stiff from another night bent awkwardly across the front seats of his decades-old sedan. He sat up slowly, wincing as his spine protested the movement, and wiped condensation from the inside of the glass with his sleeve. Through the clearing, he could see the first employees arriving at the office complex across the street, their breath forming small clouds in the November air as they hurried toward warmth and fluorescent lighting. Marcus checked his phone. 6:47. He had 13 minutes before he needed to wake his son. The boy was curled in the back seat beneath 2 donated blankets and Marcus's own winter coat, still sleeping with the peaceful oblivion that only children possessed. At 9 years old, he'd adapted to their circumstances with a resilience that broke Marcus's heart daily. 2 months ago, they'd had an apartment. Small, yes, with plumbing that rattled, and neighbors whose arguments bled through paper-thin walls, but it had been theirs. Then the restaurant where Marcus worked as a line cook had closed without warning, the owner citing rising costs and declining revenue. The unemployment checks hadn't stretched far enough to cover rent and groceries both. The choice between keeping a roof over their heads or keeping food in their son's stomach wasn't really a choice at all. Marcus had worked in kitchens since he was 16, dropping out of culinary school when his girlfriend became pregnant. Marriage had followed quickly, then divorce just as fast when she decided motherhood wasn't what she'd signed up for. The legal fees had consumed what little savings he'd managed to accumulate. For the past decade, he'd bounced between restaurant jobs, each one promising stability that never quite materialized. His hands bore the scars of hot oil and sharp knives. His feet ached from hours standing on concrete floors. But he'd never missed a shift. Never complained. Just did what needed doing to provide for his son. Now he woke each morning in a parking lot, using the restroom at a nearby gas station to wash up, changing into clean clothes he kept folded in a plastic storage bin in the trunk. His son attended school as though everything was normal. Homework completed by flashlight after dark. Breakfast consisting of whatever Marcus could afford from the discount grocery store. They showered at the community center on Tuesdays and Thursdays when it opened early for the local swim team. Nobody at the school knew. Nobody needed to know. Marcus checked his phone again. Time to wake the boy. He climbed out of the car carefully, his joints protesting the cold, and opened the rear door. His son stirred as frigid air rushed in, blinking awake with the practiced speed of someone who'd learned not to linger in the warmth of sleep. "Morning, Dad." "Morning, buddy. Get your shoes on. We'll grab breakfast on the way." They drove to a fast food place, where Marcus ordered one breakfast sandwich and split it between them, along with 2 small orange juices. His son ate mechanically, not complaining about the meager portion. He'd stopped asking for seconds weeks ago. Marcus's throat tightened, watching him. At the school drop-off line, his son grabbed his backpack, pausing before he got out. "You working today, Dad?" "Gonna put in some applications." Marcus forced optimism into his voice. "Something'll come through soon." His son nodded, not quite meeting his eyes, and climbed out. Marcus watched him disappear through the school's front entrance, shoulders hunched against the cold, before pulling back onto the street. The job search had become a full-time occupation. He'd applied to every restaurant, catering company, and food service position within a 20-mile radius. Most never called back. Those that did offered part-time hours at minimum wage, no benefits, schedules that changed weekly. Nothing sustainable, nothing that would get them back into housing. He spent his days at the public library, using their computers and Wi-Fi to submit applications, his evenings parked in various lots around the city, trying not to draw attention. The office complex parking lot had become his regular spot, large enough that one aging sedan didn't stand out, well lit enough to feel relatively safe, close enough to his son's school for the morning commute. He'd been parking there for 3 weeks before anyone noticed. The woman approached his car on a Wednesday morning, tapping on his window just as Marcus was preparing to drive to the school. He startled awake, disoriented, and found himself staring at someone who clearly didn't belong in a parking lot at dawn. She wore an expensive coat over business attire, her dark hair pulled back severely, and her expression combined concern with something else. Calculation, perhaps. "Are you all right?" Her voice was muffled through the glass. Marcus rolled down his window partway, suddenly aware of how he must look. Unshaven, wearing yesterday's shirt, eyes red from poor sleep. "I'm fine. Just waiting for someone." She glanced at the back seat where his son still slept. Your child? That's really none of your business. The words came out sharper than he intended. She didn't flinch. I'm sure it's not. But I've seen your car here every morning for weeks. Same spot. Same time. She paused. I own the company in that building. Marcus's stomach dropped. He'd thought the lot was generic office parking, not private property. I'll move. We're not bothering anyone. Wait. She raised a hand. I'm not asking you to leave. I'm asking if you need help. Pride warred with desperation. Marcus had spent 2 months deflecting questions, maintaining the fiction that everything was under control. But something about her directness, the lack of pity in her assessment, made the careful walls crack. We're between places right now. He heard how inadequate the euphemism sounded. Just temporary until I find work. What kind of work? Kitchens, line cook, prep, whatever's available. I've got 15 years' experience. She studied him for a long moment. The building behind me houses several companies, mine included. We have a corporate cafeteria that serves breakfast and lunch to employees. Our current food service contractor just gave notice. They're leaving in 2 weeks. Marcus's pulse quickened, despite his attempt to maintain composure. I could put you in touch with the contractor who's bidding for the new contract. She pulled out her phone. Or I could offer you something directly. Our company is expanding. We're planning to bring food service in-house rather than contracting it out. We'll need someone to manage it. That means menu planning, ordering, hiring, the whole operation. The role would report to our facilities director, but you'd have significant autonomy. It's not glamorous, and the kitchen is small, but it's steady work. Full-time. Benefits. He stared at her. Why would you offer that to someone you found sleeping in your parking lot? Because I recognize desperation when I see it. Her expression remained neutral. And because 15 years of kitchen experience is exactly what we need. Most people would write me off. Most people are idiots who mistake circumstance for character. She met his gaze steadily. I built my company from nothing. Slept in my office more nights than I care to remember when I was starting out. The difference between me and you is luck and timing, not capability. Marcus felt something unfamiliar stirring in his chest. Hope, perhaps, though he'd learned to distrust it. What's the catch? You start in 2 weeks. You show up on time. You do the work. And you accept the salary I'm offering without false pride about charity. This is a business decision. I need someone competent running that kitchen, and you need employment. Simple transaction. Nothing about this felt simple. But his son was waking up in the back seat, another school day beginning, another night in the car looming. Sometimes desperation looked like opportunity. You don't even know my name. Marcus Webb. She offered her hand through the window. I'm sure you'll tell me the rest during your interview. She handed him a business card. 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. 4th floor. Don't be late. She walked back toward her building without waiting for confirmation, her heels clicking precisely against the coal pavement. Marcus sat holding the card, his son stirring behind him, the morning sun finally breaking through the clouds. The building's lobby the next morning was all glass and polished stone, the kind of corporate space that made Marcus acutely aware of his second-hand suit and scuffed shoes. He'd used the last of their money on a haircut and shave at a discount barber, trying to look less like someone who'd been living in his car and more like someone deserving of employment. The receptionist directed him to the 4th floor where he found the woman from the parking lot waiting in a conference room. She'd traded her coat for a tailored blazer, and her entire demeanor radiated controlled authority. In the bright office lighting, he could see she was younger than he'd initially thought, perhaps late 30s, with the kind of precise appearance that came from rigid self-discipline. Sit. She gestured to a chair across from her. I've had HR prepare paperwork, but I want to go over expectations first. Marcus sat, his spine straight despite his nerves. The position is Kitchen Operations Manager. You'll oversee all food service for approximately 200 employees. Breakfast and lunch, Monday through Friday. You'll have a budget for supplies and equipment, and you'll hire your own staff. I'm authorizing 2 full-time positions under you to start, with possibility for expansion if volume increases. She slid a folder across the table. Starting salary, benefits package, and expectations are outlined here. The kitchen space is currently outdated but functional. I'm approving a modest renovation budget if you think it's necessary. Marcus opened the folder, scanning the numbers. The salary was more than he'd made at any previous kitchen job. Not extravagant by corporate standards, But enough. Enough for an apartment. Enough for stability. Enough for his son to stop sleeping in a car. Why me? The question came out before he could stop it. Specifically, why me? She leaned back in her chair. Because you're desperate enough to appreciate what I'm offering. And experienced enough to do it well. Because I believe competence matters more than credentials. And because I watched you split a breakfast sandwich with your son yesterday morning in the parking lot, giving him the larger half while pretending you weren't hungry. That told me more about your character than any resume could. He hadn't realized she'd seen that. The job is yours if you want it. 2 conditions. 1, you find stable housing immediately. I'm advancing you 2 weeks, salary today, to cover deposits and immediate expenses. It will be deducted from your paychecks over the next 6 months. Non-negotiable. 2, if you ever find yourself in trouble again, financial or otherwise, you tell me before it becomes a crisis. Pride is expensive. I'd rather help early than watch you struggle silently. Understood? Marcus's throat felt tight. He'd spent so long fighting alone that accepting help felt like admitting defeat. But his son deserved better than pride. Understood. Then we have an agreement. She stood, offering her hand. Welcome aboard. The handshake was firm, businesslike. As Marcus prepared to leave, she added one more thing. There's a list of apartment complexes near here that several employees use. Reasonable rent, good schools nearby. HR will provide it. And Marcus, the kitchen has been neglected for years. Make it yours. If you need equipment or changes, justify it and I'll approve it. This is your domain now. Over the following week, Marcus threw himself into preparation with the focused intensity that had characterized his entire career. He inspected the kitchen space, noting outdated equipment and inefficient layout. He drafted menus that balanced nutrition with budget constraints, reaching back to skills he'd learned in culinary school before life had redirected his path. He interviewed potential staff, ultimately hiring 2 people whose desperation he recognized because it mirrored his own. A woman returning to work after a decade, caring for an ailing parent. A young man recently released from incarceration, trying to rebuild his life. Both had the hunger for opportunity that credentials couldn't teach. The apartment he found was small but clean, with 2 bedrooms and a kitchen window that caught morning light. His son had stood in the center of his new room, silent for so long that Marcus worried something was wrong. Then the boy had turned to him with tears streaming down his face. We have beds, Dad. Real beds. They'd slept that night in actual comfort for the first time in months, though Marcus found himself waking periodically to confirm it was real. 2 weeks later, the corporate cafeteria opened under his management. Marcus arrived at 5 each morning, preparing breakfast service, overseeing his small team, ensuring everything ran smoothly. Employees began trickling in around 7, and by 8 the space bustled with activity. He'd implemented a simple but effective menu. Fresh fruit and yogurt parfaits, made-to-order omelets, quality coffee and tea. For lunch, rotating daily specials featuring seasonal ingredients, alongside reliable staples. Nothing fancy, but thoughtfully prepared with attention to dietary restrictions and preferences. The woman who'd hired him appeared occasionally, always professional, evaluating the operation with the same calculating gaze she'd first directed at his car in the parking lot. She offered no praise, but also no criticism. After the first month, she summoned him to her office. Feedback has been positive. She slid a report across her desk. Employee satisfaction with food service has increased 40%. Several people have specifically mentioned the quality and variety. Keep doing what you're doing. Marcus nodded, accepting the rare compliment. One thing. He hesitated, then pressed forward. I'd like to implement a program for employees facing financial hardship. Subsidized meals or a credit system. I know what it's like to choose between eating and other necessities. If someone's struggling, they shouldn't have to skip lunch. Her expression shifted slightly. Interesting. Propose the specifics and budget impact. If the numbers work, we'll do it. 3 months into his tenure, Marcus had transformed not just the cafeteria, but his entire life. His son thrived with stable housing and regular meals, his grades improving, his anxiety diminishing. The shadows that had haunted his eyes began to fade. They established routines. Breakfast together before school. Homework at the kitchen table while Marcus prepared dinner. Weekend trips to the library or park. Small luxuries that poverty had made impossible. Marcus himself felt the fog of constant crisis finally lifting. For the first time in years, he could think beyond immediate survival. The culinary creativity he'd suppressed for a decade began resurging. He experimented with new recipes, introduced themed lunch days, started sourcing from local farms. The cafeteria became more than functional. It became genuinely good. His boss noticed. She appeared one afternoon during lunch service, observing as Marcus expedited orders, coordinated his team, and somehow still found time to chat with employees about their preferences and dietary needs. Afterward, she gestured for him to join her at a corner table. "You're wasted here." The blunt statement caught him off guard. "I mean that as a compliment," she continued. "You have talent that exceeds this operation. I'm considering expanding our food service. Catered meetings, client events, potentially opening additional locations if we acquire the new property downtown. I want you to develop a proposal, something scalable." Marcus felt that dangerous flutter of hope again. That's significant expansion. It would mean more staff, bigger budgets, actual growth. "I know what it means." Her expression remained neutral. "Question is whether you're interested." The safe answer would have been yes, grateful acceptance of opportunity. But something about her directness invited honesty. "Why are you investing in me like this? You pulled me from a parking lot." Most people would have offered a one-time handout and moved on. She was quiet for a long moment, an unusual hesitation. "When I was building this company, I had a partner. Brilliant man, better at the technical aspects than I ever was. We were on track to be genuinely successful. Then his wife got sick, cancer. He tried to manage both the business and her care, but it became impossible. He had to choose." She paused. "He chose her, obviously. Stepped away from the company completely. I bought out his share and continued alone. She became very successful. He became a widower, working retail to pay off medical debts, raising a daughter by himself." Her gaze fixed on Marcus. "I watched someone with exceptional talent get destroyed by circumstances beyond his control. I built an empire while he sorted merchandise in a stockroom. The unfairness of it haunted me. Still does. So when I see someone capable being crushed by bad luck, I intervene. Call it guilt, call it karma, call it whatever you want. I'm correcting an imbalance." Marcus absorbed this. "Your partner, what happened to him?" She met his eyes. "He died 3 years ago. Heart attack at 47, probably from stress and overwork. His daughter aged out of foster care shortly after. I've tried to find her to offer support, but she vanished into the system. Another failure I can't correct. So yes, Marcus, I'm investing in you. Because I couldn't help him, and I refuse to watch history repeat itself when I have the power to change it." The raw honesty of it settled between them. Not charity, but atonement. Not pity, but purpose. "I'll develop the proposal." Marcus's voice was steady. "And I'll make it worth your investment." "Good." She stood, the momentary vulnerability disappearing behind her professional mask. "I expect nothing less." 6 months after Marcus had woken in her parking lot, he stood in a renovated event space on the top floor of her building, overseeing the catered launch party for her company's newest product line. His team had grown to 8 people. The menu he designed showcased local ingredients prepared with culinary school technique and real-world practicality. Investors and clients mingled, praising both the food and the ambiance. His boss appeared beside him as he surveyed the room. "You've exceeded every expectation." She accepted a past appetizer, evaluating it with the same critical eye she applied to everything. "This is restaurant quality, Marcus. You could be running your own establishment." "Maybe someday." He watched his team executing the service flawlessly. "Right now, I'm exactly where I need to be." She glanced at him. "No regrets about how this started? About accepting help from a stranger?" He considered the question. Months ago, he'd been splitting breakfast sandwiches in a parking lot, wondering how long they could survive. Tonight, he was orchestrating an event that would have seemed impossible. His son slept safely in their apartment. His future held possibility instead of just desperation. Regrets? No gratitude? Absolutely. Even though I was terrified you'd judge me for failing? Especially because you didn't. She smiled slightly, a rare crack in her composure. "I don't believe in failure, Marcus. Only circumstances and choices. You made good choices with bad circumstances. That's the hardest thing anyone can do." The party continued around them, successful and elegant. But Marcus found himself thinking about his son, probably asleep now with Mrs. Chen from downstairs checking on him. About the life they'd rebuilt from nothing. About the stranger who'd seen potential where others would have seen only problems. "You saved us." The words came out quietly. "That morning in the parking lot, you saved my son and me. I don't know how to repay that. You already are. She gestured to the room. Every person you've hired, every employee who eats a decent meal because you're running that kitchen, every local farm you're supporting with your sourcing. Impact multiplies, Marcus. You're not repaying me, you're paying it forward. A waiter approached with a question, pulling Marcus back to immediate responsibilities. As he moved to address it, his boss added one final thought. For what it's worth, I wasn't wrong about you. You're exactly as capable as I suspected that morning. Circumstances don't define people. Choices do. And you've made nothing but good ones. Months continued passing. Marcus's operation expanded to include a second location when the company acquired additional property. He hired more staff, always seeking people who needed chances more than credentials. His reputation grew beyond the company. Local food critics began hearing about the corporate cafeteria that served restaurant-quality meals. Job offers arrived from upscale establishments, offering positions that would have been unthinkable a year earlier. He declined them all. The stability mattered more than prestige. His son mattered more than ambition. One evening, as Marcus locked up the kitchen after a particularly demanding day, he found his boss waiting in the empty cafeteria. She held 2 cups of coffee, offering him one. Sit. It wasn't a request. They settled at a table near the windows, the city lights spreading below them. I need to tell you something. Her tone was more serious than usual. The expansion is exceeding projections. Board is pleased. There's talk of franchising the concept, opening locations at other corporate campuses. That's good news. Marcus sensed there was more. It is, but it means decisions about scaling, about maintaining quality versus growth. The kind of decisions that require someone who understands both the business and the mission. She paused. I'm offering you a position as Director of Food Services. You'd oversee all locations, develop the franchise model, hire management teams. Significant salary increase. Profit sharing. Real authority. Marcus stared at his coffee, processing. That's a corporate role. I'm a cook. You're a leader who happens to cook. There's a difference. She leaned forward. I've watched you manage people, solve problems, balance budgets, and maintain standards. Those are executive skills. The cooking is just your medium. He thought about his son, about stability, about how far they'd come from that parking lot. And if I fail, if I'm not ready for that kind of responsibility, then you learn and improve. Same as everyone else. Her voice softened almost imperceptibly. Marcus, you've been making life or death decisions on no sleep while living in a car. Managing corporate expansion will be easier than that, I promise. The offer was tempting. Terrifying but tempting. What's the real reason you're offering this? Because I need someone in that role who remembers what it's like to have nothing. She met his gaze steadily. Corporate America is full of people who've never struggled, never had to choose between feeding their kid or paying rent. They make decisions without understanding consequences. You won't. You'll remember that behind every employee, every budget line, every efficiency metric, there are real people whose lives depend on these choices. That's the perspective I need, leading this expansion. Marcus felt the weight of her words. The responsibility she was offering was immense. But so was the opportunity to shape something larger than himself. To create the kind of workplace that had saved him, extended to more people in more locations. Can I think about it? Take the time you need. She stood, leaving her business card on the table with a figure written on it. The salary offer. But know that this isn't charity or sympathy. This is me recognizing capability and putting it where it belongs. That night, Marcus sat in his son's room watching the boy sleep peacefully in his own bed with his own space. No more car. No more parking lots. No more splitting breakfast sandwiches and pretending he wasn't hungry. The transformation seemed impossible still. One stranger's intervention had redirected their entire trajectory. He thought about the choice ahead. The safe path would be maintaining his current role, comfortable and secure. The risky path meant stepping into territory he'd never navigated, accepting responsibility that frightened him. But wasn't that what he'd been doing all along? Making difficult choices despite fear? The next morning, Marcus arrived at his boss's office before the building fully woke. She looked up from her computer, unsurprised by his early appearance. I accept, he said simply. But I have conditions. She gestured for him to continue. Everyone I hire for management positions across all locations gets evaluated on character first, credentials second. We maintain the subsidized meal program at every site. And we establish a fund for employees facing hardship, because I know a difference that can make. Her expression remained neutral. Anything else? I want to create apprenticeship programs. Paid positions for people trying to break into food service who can't afford culinary school. Train them properly, give them real experience, help them build careers. Done. She extended her hand. All of it. Those weren't conditions, Marcus. Those were exactly the values I wanted in someone leading this expansion. You just confirmed you're the right choice. The handshake felt different this time. Not employee and employer, but partners in something larger. Equals building something that mattered beyond profit. 1 year after he'd woken in her parking lot, Marcus stood before a crowd at the opening of their 5th location. His son sat in the front row beside Mrs. Chen, both beaming with pride. His boss waited at the podium, preparing to introduce him. She'd asked him to speak about the company's mission, about their approach to food service that prioritized people over margins. As he took the podium, Marcus looked out at faces representing every level of their organization, executives and line cooks, facilities staff, and recent apprentices, people who'd been given chances when others wouldn't have risked it. A year ago, I was living in my car with my son. The opening sentence silenced the room. I'd applied to every job I could find, but desperation has a smell that makes people uncomfortable. They'd rather hire someone who doesn't need the work quite so badly. She glanced at his boss. Then someone took a chance on me. Not because of my resume or references or credentials. Because she saw capability beneath circumstance. Because she understood that poverty doesn't equal incompetence, and stability doesn't equal talent. He paused, gathering his thoughts. This company's food service mission is simple. We believe everyone deserves good food, fair wages, and genuine opportunity. We hire people others overlook. We train people others consider untrainable. We create pathways out of poverty instead of just managing it. His voice grew stronger. Every person working in our kitchens has a story. Single parents, former inmates, people recovering from addiction, immigrants navigating a new country. What they all have in common is talent, determination, and someone who finally gave them a real chance. That's what we're building here. Not just cafeterias, but possibilities. The applause was genuine, sustained. As Marcus stepped away from the podium, his boss approached. That wasn't the speech I expected. It's the truth. Sometimes that's more important than polish. She smiled, actually smiled, the expression transforming her usually severe features. You're going to be insufferable to work with now that you've found confidence. Probably. He grinned. Too late to rescind the promotion? Far too late. She gestured to his son, now racing toward them with Mrs. Chen trailing behind. Besides, I don't think the board of directors would appreciate me firing the face of our expansion right after his inspiring speech. His son crashed into Marcus with the full force of 9-year-old enthusiasm. Dad, that was amazing. Everyone was crying. Not everyone. Marcus laughed, though his own eyes were suspiciously damp. Some people were just pretending they had something in their eye. Mrs. Chen reached them, slightly out of breath. Very moving, dear. Though I hope you'll still have time for our Tuesday dinners now that you're some fancy executive. Always, Marcus promised. Nothing changes what matters. His boss observed the interaction with an expression he couldn't quite read. Later, as the crowd dispersed, she caught his arm. Walk with me. They moved to the windows overlooking the city, the late afternoon sun painting everything golden. I told you about my former partner. She spoke quietly. What I didn't mention is that his daughter, the one I've been trying to find, her name is somewhere in the foster system records, but I've hit walls. Dead ends. It's been haunting me. Why are you telling me this? Because today, watching you speak about second chances and opportunity, I realized something. Her voice held unusual emotion. I can't fix what happened to them. But every person we hire, every life we redirect toward stability, that's how I honor his memory. You've helped me understand that redemption isn't about grand gestures. It's about consistent, small ones. Marcus considered this. He's still part of this, then. What you're building. Always was. She straightened, composure returning. Which is why I'm establishing a scholarship fund in his name. Full ride for the children of our employees who want to pursue higher education. I'd like you to help administer it. Choose recipients based on need and character, not grades or conventional metrics. It was more trust, more responsibility, More proof that she saw him as a true partner in this mission. I'd be honored. Good. She turned from the window. Now go home to your son. Tomorrow we're meeting with investors about the franchise expansion, and I need you sharp. As Marcus collected his son and prepared to leave, he paused at the entrance, looking back at the space they'd transformed. A year ago, he'd been desperate and invisible. Tonight, he was shaping something that would extend far beyond himself. The stranger who'd tapped on his car window hadn't just offered him a job, she'd offered him purpose. Later, tucking his son into bed in their apartment, Marcus listened to excited chatter about the event, about school, about the weekend plans they'd made. Normal life. Stable life. The kind of life that had seemed permanently out of reach during those cold mornings in the parking lot. Dad, his son's voice grew serious. Are we going to be okay now? Forever okay? Marcus smoothed his son's hair, choosing honesty. I can't promise forever. Life doesn't work that way. But I can promise that we'll face whatever comes together, with people who care about us, with skills and opportunities we've built. We're not alone anymore. That's what makes us okay. The boy considered this, then nodded. I'm glad she found us. That lady who gave you the job. Me too, buddy. Marcus kissed his forehead. Me too. In the darkness, after his son fell asleep, Marcus sat by the window, looking out at the city. Somewhere out there, other people were sleeping in cars, choosing between food and rent, wondering if they'd ever catch a break. He couldn't save them all, but he could create spaces that honored their dignity when opportunity finally arrived. He could hire them, train them, give them the same chance he'd received. The phone on his nightstand buzzed with a message from his boss. Budget approved for 3 more locations next quarter. Board wants aggressive expansion timeline. Thoughts? Marcus smiled, typing his response. Hire carefully. Scale thoughtfully. Remember why we're doing this? Her reply came quickly. Exactly what I needed to hear. See you tomorrow, partner. Partner. The words still felt surreal. From parking lot to partnership in 12 months. Not because of credentials or connections, but because someone had looked past circumstance to see capability. Because character mattered more than resume. Because doing the right thing, even when it was hard, created ripples that extended far beyond the initial choice. Marcus set his phone aside and closed his eyes, finally allowing himself to believe in stability. The parking lot mornings felt like someone else's life now, but he wouldn't forget them. Couldn't forget them. They taught him what mattered, what he was capable of, and what he wanted to build with his second chance. In the morning, he'd wake in his own bed, make breakfast in his own kitchen, drive to work where people respected him, where his decisions shaped lives, where his past informed his purpose instead of limiting it. And somewhere, someone else would be sleeping in their car, hoping for a break that might never come. Marcus couldn't find them all, but he'd find some. And he'd remember that circumstances don't define people. Choices do. The choice to help. The choice to see potential. The choice to believe that everyone deserves dignity and opportunity, regardless of where they sleep or how desperately they need the chance. That was the real mission. Not food service or corporate expansion or franchise development. It was simply this: seeing people clearly, helping where possible, and trusting that kindness multiplied beyond measure when given space to grow. A stranger had done that for him. Now he'd spend the rest of his career doing it for others. Not charity. Just recognition that capability and circumstance were separate things, and that sometimes all someone needed was for one person to notice the difference. He drifted toward sleep, his son breathing steadily in the next room, their future stretching ahead with possibilities that had seemed impossible a year ago. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new decisions, new opportunities to shape lives. But tonight, in the warmth of home and security, Marcus simply felt grateful for second chances, for strangers who saw clearly, for the transformation that began with a single knock on a car window and grew into something that neither of them could have predicted, but both of them had built together, choice by choice, day by day, until it became something worth building a life around, something that mattered.